Mhm.
Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Nurit and I'm speaking with you today from Budapest, Hungary. And today I have three wonderful guests. Right on the top of my top left, I guess, is Rome. Oh, you can see the name. That's fantastic. Rome Za. He is his program is called Nervous System Evolution. I absolutely love that name, and he teaches these amazing breathing techniques that help clean out the lungs and reset your nervous system. So that's pretty darn good. I've been doing it for a few months now and I absolutely love it. I can tell if I miss a day. I can actually tell. So it's absolutely wonderful. And below here is Dr. Garrett Smith. And Dr. Smith is a naturopathic physician and has actually cracked the code to nutrition, believe it or not. After years of trying every diet conceivable, and they all contradict each other, you know that. Vegan says that paleo is bad and vice versa. Finally, I was able to find the right nutrition
Hmm.
through Dr. Smith, and I'm very, very grateful. I've been working with him for about 2 years, almost 2 years actually, and very pleased with the results. If you want to know more about the results, I have interviewed him 3 times, so you can either look those videos up on my channel or on his channel or Dr. Garrett Smith's website. So there you have it. And last but not least, my buddy here, Gabor Harsanyi. Gabor is an awakening coach and he frees people from thought addiction. Lord knows thinking has taken over. The mind, collective mind, and personal mind, in most cases, have taken over. And well, how is it working out so far? Not so good. We have nothing but wars and families torn apart, friends leaving each other because of difference of opinions that have now become violently opposed to each other. And it's not looking good. So we definitely need some kind of awakening, but you'll hear more about that later. So one thing that, two things that, well, at least two things that these three have in common is they, all three of these guys um, are on the right track. They have phenomenal information. And it's really, really important right now because there's so much false information out there that when there is finally some good stuff to listen to or to watch, it's usually buried in a sea of irrelevant information and it's very hard to find. So that was my impetus for wanting to have them on this panel because they will shed some light on some of the most important aspect of life, health being one of them, and spirituality another one. And in the future, we'll have some more as well.
Hmm.
But I thought that would be more very important. They're also extremely dedicated to helping humanity. They're not like any other doctor or philosopher or spiritual guru who's out there to get many, many clients and become very rich, although that's not bad, not a bad thing. But their soul, you can feel it when you work with them. I worked with all three of them, and you can really tell that their goal, their aim is the customer. They're very customer centric and they want to help. So that's another thing that I really admire about the three of them. And last but not least, they have not left out masculinity from their life. Rome has a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I hope I said it right.
Yeah.
Gabor here has a black belt in Hapkido. He actually taught it in
Yeah.
Toronto Police Force.
Yeah, 1973. So
That's okay. You don't have to give up, give your age. And Dr. Smith can shoot a gun like nobody's business. So watch out. So that's another thing that I admire so much. But so before I keep on blabbing here, I'm just going to read the three main questions that we want to cover today. I'm going to ask each one. And that is really the context for this video. The first one is, how and to what extent have you found deception in your area of expertise? what are the consequences of these deceptions? And what are some of the remedies, techniques, or treatments that you have in order to help people with this? So let's start. Why don't we start with Rome?
Mm. Uh, if I just look at the human body in general, in the beginning of my journey, I was told that the only options that I had for healing were through surgery, injections, pain meds, and quitting doing what I love doing. When I was 21, I was diagnosed with multiple herniations in my spine. Um, I had torn both my rotator cuffs, my hip, my right hip, my right knee, my right ankle. I was struggling with like anxiety, insomnia, depression. I started to have like suicidal ideations because they told me I couldn't do the thing that I just found that I love doing, which is martial arts. They told me I would never be able to do again. And I went to over a dozen different specialists, in from orthopedics to physical therapy to all of these things, and they kept telling me the same thing. There were three options: it was surgery, injections to alleviate the pain or mask the pain, and pain meds. That's it. And that's what started this journey of discovery, of trying to figure out what is it that I am. I don't know if they were even knowingly deceiving me, because I believe that a lot of them just they're ignorant to the fact that people have been able to heal for thousands of years before allopathic medicine came around. So I don't believe that most doctors' intentions are evil. I just think that they have investment bias, where after they've invested $500,000 or more into their education, and even if they do find out that what they are selling is bullshit, it's hard to go back, because what are you going to do? You have $500,000 invested with a fluctuating percentage. I mean, student loans can go up to 15% a year. I mean, that's a real estate investment, and like it's absurd to even think about them getting into that trap, but they are trapped. And I believe that was a huge deception. I mean, at the lower level, obviously, we can talk about the Rockefellers, and we can talk about all of these elite families that actually created the pharmaceutical industry and the medical school industry, because those are industries. But at the lower level, I don't think a lot of these doctors are knowingly deceiving, or I would say consciously deceiving. Maybe unconsciously they're aware that what they're doing is bullshit, because I think that after 1,000 case studies of something not working, and hitting your head on a wall 1,000 times, you would start to maybe walk around it or try to crawl over it. I found a lot of deception there, whether it was by leaving something out, or by just purely just saying whatever was in the textbook that they were supposed to say. What was the second question?
What are the consequences?
The consequences. The consequences are, I'm going to use martial arts and movement and physical fitness as an example. Most people in my previous space of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like I just finished training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu 20 minutes ago. I had a fellow black belt come by, and we were training, and we're talking about how I don't know any black belts that aren't crippled, that don't have permanent debilitating injuries, or what I would like to call micro disabilities. And at least in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a very active and very in a lot of friction and pressure, and it's very abusive on the body. So a lot of these guys, they can't. Maybe they can still train jiu-jitsu barely, but they can't have sex. They can't play with their kids. They just feel like shit all the time. I mean, it's the running. I don't even want to say joke, but the running meme in jiu-jitsu is like, if you don't wake up feeling like you got hit by a truck in the morning, then you didn't really train the day before. And a lot of these guys, they go to doctors and some of the best guys in the world have a multitude of surgeries. Hickson Gracie has 8 herniated discs in his back, and now he just got diagnosed with what did he get? Some like chronic disease. One of his top students that I trained with, he had like 6 surgeries between his knees and his shoulders, and he wasn't even 40 at the time. And
Wow.
it's because they go to doctors, and the doctors don't ever look at, for the most part, MDs at least, don't ever look at what the ancients knew about physical movement and breath work, and even diet and nutrition, and just like healing in general. Because back in the day, things were more holistic. You had people like Doc that would move their body and would work on healing and would do all of these things, because it's not separate. You can't be like, you have to go to a toe specialist, and you have to go to an ear specialist and a dick specialist over here, because
Yeah.
it's so absurd that all these specialists are like fingers on a hand that don't believe that they're on the hand.
Yeah.
And it's very sad to see, because a lot of these people are being led astray in their lives, and they don't have a high quality of life. I mean, right now, I believe the statistic that I read actually about a year ago, that most MDs have a shorter life expectancy than their patients.
Oh my God.
So why the fuck would I listen to somebody that has it doesn't make, why would I go to a fat guy to learn how to get in shape? Why would I go to a sick guy to learn how to get healthy? It's absurd. We live in an upside down world currently. And a lot of it, I believe, is because for so long they said, oh, the Chinese didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. The Indians didn't know what the fuck they were talking about. Nobody knows what they're talking. Only we, in our current 100-year paradigm of medicine, we know what we're talking about. Where it's just like, we have a 72% overweight and obesity rate in the country of the United States. Like, maybe you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I mean, look across the board. It's a very deep downhill slide. The children right now are born, 1 out of 22 boys is born with very heavy autism, like diapers and a helmet autism. 1 out of 36 kids in general. Adults, I mean, 1 out of 4 or 1 out of 3, I think now, has a chronic disease that they take multiple pills for. I mean, it's just like, the statistics are just like crazy, but we're just like, double down. Let's go more. Let's go deeper. And that's the price that we pay. That's the price that we pay for listening to fucking retards.
Yep. For not opening our eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, it's like, on one end, it's either we're listening to retards, or on the other end, there's evil there, right? Because those are the only 2 options that I see. They're either retarded or they're evil, or both, which is very scary. But at least if they're retarded and evil, we can figure out a way around it. But if they're just evil, and a lot of people don't want to imagine that there's something evil that's behind the curtains, because to imagine that something is evil behind the curtains means that you have to acknowledge that there's something evil inside of you because you can recognize it.
Wow.
So a lot of people, whether it's conscious or unconscious, it's a very scary thing to acknowledge. So I'd rather just take my medicine and shut the fuck up.
Yeah. And how is that working out?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it's just sad to see so many incredible humans being deceived. And the only way you can be deceived is if you consent to it.
That's right. That's right.
Because it takes consent. Nobody's forcing you to take your medicine. Nobody's forcing you to get a shot. Nobody's forcing you to go to the doctor. Nobody's forcing you to live where you live. You are consenting to it, whether you realize it or not. And I think that's a big thing. It's like 100% responsibility for our lives, 100% responsibility for our body, for what we consume. You know, I talked to somebody recently and they're like, oh, like, we're talking about like hypnosis and mind control. And I was like, yeah, imagine I studied hypnosis for a long time. So somebody comes to me in 1 hour, we can change the trajectory of their life. And this is with no tools. Imagine what Hollywood could do with 3 hours of undivided attention.
Oh,
And they were like, oh, I don't get mind control. It's like,
yep. Yeah. When you see young kids, young people today, still with masks on, there's nothing. There never was anything. They're still wearing masks, and their belief system is so scary. Never get off the phone. It's horrible.
it's a scary time.
Okay.
Okay, third question. The solution?
Yes. What your solution?
My solution.
In
My
your
solution is to take back control of the nervous system as the first step. Take back control of the nervous system, because if the nervous system is out of control, we're constantly living in a state of fear. If we're living in a state of fear, then we're possibly living in a state of hate, disgust, and all these other things that come out of the state of fear, right? We have low thymus activity, and we're making decisions based on very short-term results that we're looking for. For example, a faulty nervous system or dysfunctional nervous system, like living in a sympathetic dominance, can make you make very poor choices because your choices are very reactionary, or you're either overreacting or underreacting. So when you're making decisions like that, you're constantly cleaning up your mess. You're constantly shitting your bed. And the problem with that is that instead of going out to get some fresh air and some sunshine, you're constantly in your room trying to get rid of the smell. Maybe you yelled at your child, you yelled at your spouse, you yelled at yourself, even more importantly, and then you have the guilt and the shame associated with it. So until we learn how to take back control of our nervous system, we're constantly creating those cycles. We're not just living in the cycle, we're recreating it with every relationship, with every experience that we have. And it's very sad because it's honestly the easiest thing that I think we can do. I mean, that's the reason why I chose the nervous system to start with, because it's like, if you can do it in 7 minutes a day, most people will be like, okay, you know what? I can find 7 minutes in my life. And then what happens with that is that then it makes doc's work easier. Because if somebody is choosing, like they're constantly like stopping and choosing what they're putting in their mouth, what they're putting in their ears, what they're putting in their eyes, what they're putting in their body, on their skin, then now they can start truly detoxing and doing the really deep, like getting that shit out. Because it's like, if you're living in a reactionary state, you're constantly succumbing to your cravings. And most people, if you look around, like these children, right, that you said, they're on their phones. That's a craving. That's because their nervous system is dysfunctional. And it's the titty. They're looking for the titty. They're looking for the sucker. And nowadays, the sucker comes everywhere. It's smoke, drink, fuck, porn,
Look for
scroll.
the
It's everywhere, right? Like sugar, like sweets, like, I mean, everywhere. There's so much. Pick your poison, right? You go somewhere like Las Vegas, you have all the poisons. So it's just like pick your poison, and until the nervous system is like truly dialed in and responsive, because that's what we're looking. We're looking to respond, to stop and be like, I don't need to punch this person in the face. I can just wish them well and walk away. You know, or I don't need to punch myself internally in the face. I can just, I can just give myself love, forgive myself, and break that cycle. Because a lot of us were potentially, as humans, raised by other broken humans. So we have these cycles that we're in. So we learned a lot of our nervous system reactions from our parents, from our grandparents, from our school teachers, from our schoolmates, that we're stuck in that space. And I think that it's the easiest thing that we can start with is just correcting our breath through the bottom up. Because if we can correct the nervous system from the bottom up, well, then we don't have to sit in psychoanalysis and psychotherapy on a couch with a therapist maybe rubbing our head, best case scenario, and listening to our problems every week, twice a week, $150 an hour. Hopefully they're hot so we can keep coming back. But if they're not, then because that'll make me want to do some psychoanalysis.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the solutions are out there.
Yeah.
The solutions are out there.
That's wonderful. I highly recommend your program. Anybody, I felt a difference in a very short time, and very grateful that Dr. Smith recommended you, because it's helping, because I'm doing Dr. Smith's program, and I was probably his worst case of accumulating toxins. And so sometimes in the mornings, it's really hard to get up, because that's when my body likes to say bye-bye to all the toxins, and it doesn't feel good. But since I've been doing your exercises, I'm very different in the morning now. It's much better. My mood is better. My lower back doesn't hurt so much. So I'm very, very grateful. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
I mean, you deserve it.
Thank you. Yes, everyone does. It's just a matter of I guess for me, the big turning point is recognizing that, damn it, there's nothing is working, After 40 years of searching spiritually, I had to look at myself seriously and say, why am I still seeking? Why am I seeking in the places that I'm seeking if I'm not getting results? I've never met anyone, I have so many friends that they don't ask that. They're still going along sheep. Okay, another mantra, another guru. Or I want results. And again, before I met Dr. Smith, the same thing. I lay in bed and started praying. I was like, why am I've done all these things and nothing works. What is it that is going to work? And that's when I found Dr. Smith. So I think a lot of it, like you were saying, we have to really look at what we're attracting and why, So enough about me. Let's hear from Dr. Smith.
Okay. So, well, in terms of that first question, the biggest deception that is going on, I'm going to keep it to one topic today, because in terms of nutrition and toxicities, a lot of people will limit me to the vitamin A toxicity guy, but it's grown bigger and deeper than that. But the biggest thing, that I see that we've been deceived on is the fact that vitamin A, what we call vitamin A, or what I say the so-called vitamin A, is not actually necessary for humans at all, and it is purely a toxin. It doesn't mean we have to avoid it entirely, because you can't avoid it entirely with any diet. It's in muscle meat. It's in people will then start to argue and say, well, how can this be present everywhere if we're not supposed to have it? And that just doesn't, it's like breathing oxygen is killing us too, but we still have to do it, right? It's like we're oxidizing, but we have to do this. Part of being alive. Like, part of being alive is slowly dying. But this vitamin A, as I was going through working with people, I came across, well, I was getting to the point where the people I'd had for years were doing well. Not everything was gone, but then slowly little things started popping up. And me, because I always look at my work of going, how can I make it better? And I thought, instead of blaming the clients, like a lot of people might do, I said, something I'm doing is not fixing everything. I'm missing something. And so eventually, I came across Grant Generou's work where he got into vitamin A toxicity, and he fixed his jaundice, his terrible eczema. He fixed his chronic kidney disease by minimizing vitamin A in his diet. And as I went through his free ebooks on his website, I went whole, because I was actually giving people, I was encouraging vitamin A consumption. I was giving people vitamin A supplements. When I tried to be, I was trying to be more natural, I would still give them liver pills, when I was trying not to do the supplements. And there was these slow things that were creeping up on people. And so I said, it's got to be something that is slowly accumulating in the system. And then I got Grant's work and I started doing it and I started feeling better. And then I just said, I have to change everything I'm doing. And over time, I kind of, Grant's an amazing guy, and he came out with his very simplistic diet, which was just simply beef or bison and black beans and white or brown rice. And he became the first guy that his doctors had ever seen who had recovered from chronic kidney disease in terms of all his labs. Grant says a second person has contacted him now who has recovered completely from chronic kidney disease. And the nephrologist, the kidney doctors, had never seen this before. So kind of like what you guys were talking about with Rome earlier, we're seeing stuff, we can fix this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The simplest thing that I was always looking for was, what do we need to give the body, right? What do we really need to give the body or restore deficiencies? And then what do we need to avoid the toxicities? And then also to help the body. It's still out there one deception in the nutritional world is people are so delusional about, they'll be like, the body doesn't accumulate toxins. And I'm like, what in the heck are you talking about? Like, it takes me 2 seconds on PubMed. All they need to know is a different word. You look up the word accumulate. You just don't look up store, because they don't call it store. They call it accumulate. You accumulate, just like people accumulate stuff in their house. If they're kind of a hoarder type, they accumulate it. They may not be storing it. They don't call it storing. They're just like, I'm keeping it. So we get into this vitamin A thing, and we start to find that this is the big deception. Anytime you ever find a research study where they're about to say vitamin A did something bad, they always start the paper with vitamin A is absolutely necessary for this and this and this and this. And so they always gaslight you at the very start of the study. And then they go into, kind of at the end, we found it was not so good. And then I start pulling up all the research showing, vitamin A is bad in cod liver oil. I start showing 3 gigantic studies on beta carotene supplements had to be stopped because people were getting cancer early or dying early. They give U.S. military veterans Retin-A, which is the active form of vitamin A. And they had to stop that study because too many of them were dying early, even though they already took out the military veterans that they thought could potentially die early. Like they took them out of the study at the start, and then they still had to stop the study because the Retin-A was killing people. And Retin-A is all trans retinoic acid, which in the studies they typically call retinoic acid. Now, people then often come to me and they go, well, that's synthetic vitamin A. I have studies from the 1950s on humans, on multiple types of animals, where they showed that at the same dose, at the same form of vitamin A, they were exactly the same toxicity. So there is no difference. This is people get into the appeal to nature fallacy, which is they think that just because it's natural, it must be good or better. When the very same science that discovered these compounds in the body, in foods, used the same analysis to say this is retinoic acid in foods, or I'm not sorry, it's not in foods, but this is beta carotene in foods, and here we can manufacture beta carotene synthetically, and by our scientific analysis, they are exactly the same molecule. And then you have these delusional people out in the natural health world saying that these molecules function differently in the body. And you go, that doesn't make any sense. They're the same thing. They may come with different things, but the whole idea, I mean, what do we digest things for? We digest things to break them apart into their individual pieces. So how would they all stay together in the body? Anyway, but so vitamin A now, you start finding, there was a study on, they did an autopsy study. They were looking at 27 dead bodies that the researchers could get. So finding autopsies to study on is very difficult, but these were 27 Americans. And when they actually did, the only way you can truly find vitamin A toxicity is to look at a liver biopsy, to look at a chunk of the liver under a microscope and to measure the vitamin A in it. And when they did this with 27 Americans, 9 of the bodies could be diagnosed with vitamin A toxicity in their liver.
Oh.
And they specifically said in the paper that none of these toxic people would have been figured out by the blood tests alone.
Yep.
They specifically said that. So we have this hidden epidemic of vitamin A toxicity going on. And the funniest thing about I've pulled up tons of these necropsy, autopsy studies from all different countries around the world. And one of the funny things is, you know where they're giving people the most free vitamin A in the world? They're doing it in Africa. Now, when you look at the autopsy studies, the liver biopsy studies, the places that had sometimes 50% of the people they looked at were toxic in vitamin A in their liver was Africa. So they're giving them more than anybody else. And yet studies, and they haven't done many autopsy studies since these 1950s, 1960s studies. Anyway, now we've got Bill Gates. Bill Gates is funding, giving prenatals with vitamin A to them through the Vitamin Angels all around the world. They're giving free vitamins away to pregnant women with vitamin A in them. And for those of you ladies and men who love your ladies, there's only one vitamin that's really considered to be dangerous during pregnancy, and that's vitamin A.
Yep.
Both for miscarriages, birth defects, all that stuff. But there is Bill Gates giving it out to people for free. He sponsors the development. He's paid millions of dollars for the development of genetically modified plant foods that make more vitamin A. Golden rice, you may have heard of. He's now made an unsweet banana that makes vitamin A in it.
Oh,
He's done other things like, I think it was yams or some sort of root vegetable. He made it make even more vitamin A than it already did. So he's obviously into this. Now we have the World Health Organization. If you go on their page and you see the term, they have a vitamin A immunization. Immunizations, which I'm not a fan of any single one ever, right? But immunizations are usually named after a disease, right? Vaccinations are named after a disease. So what does a vitamin A immunization mean?
yeah.
Is vitamin A therefore a disease? Does it cause disease? Anyway, so we have all of this stuff going on. And one of the last things I want to say about it, the big deception that we kind of scientists and researchers have absolutely ignored, and nutrition gurus have completely ignored, is a concept called aposematism. APOSEMATISM, aposematism, which is how nature tells us through coloration of animals and plants what is poisonous, because nature's trying to say, the whole idea of it is it's saying I'm brightly colored or strongly colored or darkly colored, because it could be like eggplants are really toxic and they're not brightly colored, but they're dark, right? They're a strong color and they're dark color. So we get into, nature tries to tell us, like, don't mess with me. I'm toxic. I'm poisonous. It's not worth you messing with me. I mean, nowadays we have people doing it with their hair color, right? They're making their hair crazy colors and they're saying, don't mess with me. I may not be worth it. So with these animals are, poisonous snakes, brightly colored or very darkly colored if they're toxic. Nature did the same thing with certain fruits and vegetables. It made them very brightly colored and very strongly colored. Whether the colors of vitamin A, I'm not going to get into the polyphenols and other stuff. People who know all of my work, we're not going to get into polyphenols, which aren't good for you either. But the colors of vitamin A, yellow, orange, red, And then it really shows up a lot in dark green
Yeah.
foods. Now, people go, well, dark green doesn't sound like a vitamin A color. Well, what colors did we learn in grade school that make green? We got yellow plus blue make green. So we get that. That's where the vitamin A, some of the highest vitamin A foods are the dark green things.
Yeah.
And what's everybody being pushed to eat more of, right?
Dark
Eat
green.
your dark green leafy vegetables and eat the rainbow and all of this stuff. And Eat the Rainbow only came about in the US in 2005 via Sesame Street. So in terms of mainstream culture, so we got our nutrition from Sesame Street, and it makes, you know, kids and bright colors and all that stuff. It sounds good, right? You're going to eat these colors and they're going to be good for you, when it's actually nature marking poison. And when we start to understand that, and then you start going, bitter things are also toxic. The reason we have a bitter taste on our tongue is to warn us that something is toxic. Well, you've got all sorts of people giving bitter herbs, and especially like dark green leafy vegetables. They're bitter, right? Nature uses sugar in a lot of foods, a lot of these brightly colored fruits, to cover the bitterness. So that nature, because nature wants its seeds to be spread. So it needs the animals to eat the fruit, eat the seeds, so they poop it out, but they're also doing these brightly colored fruits, but they put sugar in it to cover it. So anyway, the big deception that I do most, that my kind of main area, my first area of expertise was vitamin A toxicity. I just took it a lot further in terms of how to, what we really, you know, because there are people out there who have hurt themselves on a low vitamin A diet, trying to go lower than they should, and actually making a very nutritionally deficient diet in other ways. This was in the research from a long time ago. They said we can't do a zero vitamin A diet because the diet would be inadequate. You'd be missing all sorts of things. Like, as an example, some people at the very start of this did a white flour and white sugar diet.
Oh, yeah.
And they started to say, I'm getting sick on this diet. And it's like, really? Are you?
I love humans.
I mean, people always have to take it to an extreme. I say, you know, if somebody wanted to do like a totally zero vitamin A diet, they could eat collagen powder, and they could use coconut oil, and they could use what's a starch? Oh, they could eat like white sugar or white rice or something like that. So they get protein, they get fat, and they get carbs. Do I think that's a useful diet? No, that's not a useful diet. Probably a dangerous diet over time. But anyway, so the biggest thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to help people figure out like how to fix their health issues while still living a semi-normal life. Like, I'm not trying to make shut-ins and hermits who can't go outside. And so there's people in the low vitamin A community who think I'm like too slack on things. And then I just go, well, I'm getting people better. So we're not trying to make hermits out of it. But so one of the big things that I wanted to relate to Rome stuff, as I started getting into the breath work myself, is that we talk about the detox pathways of the body. We talk about, you know, the liver to the bile. Most people don't think about the bile. They just talk about the liver, and you go, the liver just processes things. The liver doesn't make things disappear. It can change things. It can change toxins into worse toxins or less toxic things. But the liver to the bile to the poop is one. Then we have the kidneys to the urine to out. And then we have through the skin. But the thing that I had been undervaluing until I got into Rome's work was that the breath is actually like a fourth detox pathway. And we get rid of aldehydes through the breath. And the human body's constantly making aldehydes. A lot of people in the health industry are constantly eating aldehydes, like all those smelly spices and herbs that you're eating in your cabinet are all full of aldehydes. All the essential oils that people are poisoning themselves with are all full of aldehydes. And then retinaldehyde. Most people don't know that a form of vitamin A is an aldehyde. And we could get rid of that through breathing. And obviously we all have to breathe. But as I've been explaining it to people, I'm like, if every breath you took during the day was better, you're getting rid of more aldehydes and other gaseous toxins all day long. Even when you're sleeping, you know, just because you're breathing better. So that's a big thing. I mean, I'll just go into the next one. The consequences of The consequences of a poisoned, toxic society. How could that cause problems? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I remind people, like, I talk about nature and nurture. So Rome's work is, I do absolutely like, people have to work on the physical part of it. And I mean, the breath work can be both, right? The breath work can be spiritual and physical, but people have to work on the physical part. Because it would be like, if somebody got really toxic, that can change their physical manifestations, right? But then you want them to do both. What I get to people is, like, when they get really toxic and they start fixing the toxicity, they may have learned really bad patterns while they were toxic. And so you have to kind of relearn the right patterns to fix it. And does one support the other and vice versa? Absolutely. So that's where, like, I do my physical practices, I do the breath work, I do my approach, my personal approaches to fitness and all that stuff, which is heavily influenced by Rome these days. And then we have to, it's just undoing a lot of the things that we learned or took on ourselves along the way. But the toxicity, the thing I remind people of is the toxicity. Like, let's say you have toxicity in your brain, right? And it's affecting your brain. Well, if you have toxicity anywhere, you have toxicity in your brain. We can always, it's kind of like posture, right? You can consciously fix your posture, right? You can do all these things to fix your posture. But if your underlying, like, root cause of your posture problem is not being addressed, then as soon as you stop thinking about it, you go back. Right. So if it's not an unconscious, you have to fix kind of the below the conscious level stuff to get it to work. And with toxicity, let's say in your brain, if you're constantly just trying to think differently, but as soon as you forget to think differently and the toxicity is still there, it just takes you right back. This is why I think a lot of, like, Rome, you probably agree with this, a lot of, and you guys may agree with this, a lot of attempts at therapy don't work because people are still really deeply toxic, or they don't want to get to, let's even say, the root cause of the emotional thing, spiritual thing that's going on. They don't want to get there. So anyway, it all connects. And what was the last question?
I
Oh,
lost
did I cover it? I probably covered all of it.
what you do to fix it.
Well, he already
What do we do to fix it? Well, I'll run through the simple things in terms of people who might be wondering, how do I reduce vitamin A in my world? It's pretty simple. In the animal foods world, I'm not going to get into all the reasons for all these, but generally it's avoid pork, avoid egg yolks, avoid organ meats, minimize or avoid dairy. Dairy has multiple levels of toxicity depending upon where you get it from. You can get less toxic dairy, but still it's a very high vitamin A food and a very high calcium food. Some of those can be like pouring gasoline on a fire. We have the last thing I do tell people is fish and shellfish, because the waters are toxic. There's no getting around this. Like, you're not going to find non-toxic waters, which means the fish are breathing that. They are marinating it in it. They are living in it. Like, wild fish are still swimming in toxic oceans. There's no getting around it. So those are just toxic. I mean, if you want to eat forever chemicals and you want to eat microplastics and you want to eat mercury and you want to eat all that stuff, I mean, go ahead. But you can get essential fatty acids if you're still on that kick. You can get that from beef. Like, you don't need fish for that. And then in the plant world, it would be minimizing or avoiding the parts of the plant that are yellow, orange, red, dark green. And then if you can find, so like an example of the things that I tend to eat in the plant food world would be white, off-white, light green. And it's as simple as that. So what I mean by the parts you eat, if you're eating a banana, the outside's yellow. The inside is white, off-white. So the part you eat is fine, and then you throw out the peel, right? Or if you peel a cucumber and you peel off the dark green and you can eat the white inside, that's fine. So it can be, so that should hopefully reduce a lot of the confusion. But basically, it turns into, there's lots of foods you can eat. Some people who have been on very highly restrictive diets come to my work and they're like, wow, I can eat so many things. And if you tolerate them, yes, you can eat quite a few things. It's not as, we don't get rid of any food group per se. There's things that you can eat from every food group. So that's one way of fixing it. And the only way to get the vitamin A toxicity out of you is to, over time, it's just like a bank account. If you have to reduce the amount of vitamin A in so that your body can increase the amount or can get rid of what it stores. You have to have less coming in than you have leaving. And it's as simple as that. It's just math. Like, this is really, as Rome was talking about, it's not that hard once you know what to do. Once you know how to get the equation working, it's not that hard. So I guess that's what I got.
And I really like with your approach that there's minimal supplements, because like a lot of other detoxes that I've done, it's like $1,000 in supplements a month. And it's not even $1,000. It's the fact that like all day I'm eating supplements, like 40, 50 pills. And it's just like, no, thank you.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. And I like that you teach us how to feel what's working and what's not working. You know,
Isn't that amazing? How many practitioners, people will come to them. I mean, I've heard people come back to me and say this, and they go, it was always a natural thing. Somebody comes to me and they say, I took this and I didn't feel good, or I really didn't feel good. I was like, don't take it. It's not good for you. Like, how difficult is it for people? I think about the practitioners that they had to overcome that. They have somebody tell them, I took this, it made me feel bad. And the practitioner actually has to sit there and go, no, keep taking it.
yeah.
You feel bad, but keep taking it. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
the definition of insanity, right?
Exactly.
Take this, it makes you
It's
feel
guru
bad, but it's
versus
going to eventually
teacher.
make you feel good. And I go,
Yeah.
It's like guru versus teacher.
Yeah.
You know, those are.
Yeah.
the one naturopathic principle, the naturopathic doctor principle that I took really to heart was, it's docere, which is doctor as teacher. And that was one that I want to teach people how to do this, because my goal is not to create like client addicts who have to have me forever. I want them to go out and help themselves and teach their kids how to do it, and teach, people they live with how to do this, and why, and all that stuff. So yeah.
Unless they're beautiful of childbearing years.
That's it. That makes a difference.
They can have private lessons. That's what.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And again, I highly recommend you, and I so appreciate everything that you've taught me and still teaching me almost every week. And so all the information of Roman and Dr. Smith will be on the description below, so you can look them up. And last but not least, Gabor Harsanyi.
What about it?
Your question, you want to remind?
No,
And your expertise.
my expertise. Well, it's interesting that the dark green color, the translation in Hungarian, is called poison green. Most people would use. There's a translation which says dark green, but most people refer to that dark green as poison green. So it's very, very interesting. So we have, you mentioned the definition of insanity. We keep on doing the same thing and expect different results. And I believe that it's time for us to actually change the definition. We keep on doing things with the same level of consciousness and expecting different results. We came to a stage where we are at this, in the world stage, and everywhere there's just so much confusion, fear, and everything. And it's not getting better. We are being misled left, right, and center. All there is layers and layers and layers of bullshit. So we as people have to, should learn who we are. Should is not a good word, but one of the things we must learn is to learn how to think. If we don't know how to think, we're not going to be able to choose Rome's exercises or a Dr. Smith diet. By the way, I'm doing Rome's exercises and Garrett's program. So in order to learn how to think, first we have to learn how not to think. Thinking on the top of thinking just won't do. And choosing a better thought is fine, temporary, but it won't do. We have to enter this new level of consciousness, or a higher level of consciousness, in order to learn how to think, in order to have a better, healthier society. So where do we go to get into a higher level of consciousness? We go above the clouds, or we go to a guru in India, or where is it?
No more. Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt.
Well, something runs our body, even though there is problems. Everyone has health problems and stuff, but even though there is problems, there's part of the body is absolutely perfect. God runs the body that's absolutely perfect right now. And so where do we go for a higher level of consciousness? We go to the body. Now, what is mainstream spirituality says? Almost everyone, every teacher. I'm not the body, I'm not the body. Ramana Maharshi says, I'm not the body. And this guy said, I'm not the body. Oh, it's so fashionable, I'm not the body. Well, you idiot. Where do you go for your higher level of consciousness? There is part of you that's absolutely perfect. That's where the higher level of consciousness is. And that's where we have to go for the higher level of consciousness. So in spirituality, the body have been sort of pushed aside. Oh, the body. No, the body is over here. And so by pushing the body aside and degrading it, basically, we don't have the source of perfection that we need right now in order to actually start being better and surviving. In order to make permanent change, we need that perfection in the body to make that permanent change. So we can think and choose wonderful things for ourselves, like these two programs over here. So the common misperception is that something is wrong with me, I have to fix it. And what I'm saying is there is an existing perfection in us right now that we could get in touch with. That's what I teach, how to get in touch with that perfection right now. Even though there is, let's say, pain in the body, we can still get in touch with that perfection. Then once we get in touch with that perfection, we can turn around, and from that perspective, we can address the problems. And from that perspective, we can find wonderful, intelligent programs like Rome's program and Garrett's program. So once we can't make good choices from damaged thoughts. Damaged thoughts will beget damaged thoughts. So there is a way to get in touch with the perfection inside the body. By the way, somebody more intelligent than me said, kingdom of God is within, apparently. And, and seek ye first the kingdom of God, which is inside, and everything else shall be added unto. I didn't hear any conditions there. You can seek first, it doesn't say seek first the perfection, which is within, provided that first you go through all kinds of therapy and fix a whole bunch of things, fix your thoughts. It doesn't say that. God, universe, that power exists within us that we could actually get in touch with, then turn around and make all kinds of wonderful choices. So the whole spiritual world is full of layers and layers and layers of bullshit. They are not necessarily bad people or bad teachers. They are very ignorant. Just by accepting the fact that we push the body aside and focus on the mind only, because apparently fix the mind and the body will get fixed. Okay, in my opinion, what needs to be fixed is the original sin. We used to be holding God's hand all the time, quote unquote, and now we left it. So by getting in touch with the component of us that is part of God, that will make the permanent change. And then we can start thinking, and we're not going to be subject to all the bullshit and all the manipulation and all things like that. So in order to make those wonderful permanent changes, we need to again hold God's hand, quote unquote, get in touch with the universe. And once that original sin is fixed, things will start to get much, much better. So.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, it's certainly been through using your techniques that I found, Dr. Smith. Instead of Googling again and again and thinking, I just went to that place that you talk about. And instantly, just like that, I got up, went to the computer, and there was Dr. Smith. And everything fell into place. And by following Dr. Smith, I found Rome.
Yeah.
Completely.
I mean, me too.
That's right. Yeah. Wow.
So the consequences of not evolve, say, spiritually, health-wise and otherwise, are totally disastrous. I mean, we have to be able to empower ourselves, get reacquainted, get in touch with the universe, with God again, and then things will start shifting. That's all I gotta say about that. As far as gone.
Yeah. So much confusion out there, so it's good to clarify all those things. How are you guys doing for time?
I mean, I'm fine on time.
Okay, good,
You
because
want to do like another round of questions?
yeah, there's a few questions that came in. I told a few people that this is happening, and there's a few questions.
Yeah, I'm good on time. I have full freedom in my life.
You don't got to brag, bro. No. Okay.
It's okay. You'll get the humility award later.
Well, if I don't tell them, then they'll never know.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Okay. There's a question for Dr. Smith. If you had a magic wand and you can change something about modern mainstream nutrition, what would that be?
Christmas.
The whole damn thing.
I'm trying to think of something that is, I mean, I could get very like, well, let's just make vitamin A disappear. Like, that's not what I'm trying to, it would be, well, one of the things I like to talk, it would be the original studies on vitamin A. We've actually, Grant and I have discussed this a lot. And the way so when they first tried to discover, I always joke to people, I say, when you're learning something new, at what point are you most likely to make the biggest mistakes? Right? And people who understand the question, they go, well, at the beginning, right? That's when you make the biggest mistakes. You're new to it. You have no idea what you're doing. And that's when you're supposed to make the biggest mistakes. Well, vitamin A was named so because A is the first letter of the alphabet. And that was their first vitamin. And that's when they made the biggest mistake. So as we are trying to, the biggest thing that we could kind of undo, I think, would be that faulty study and everything that has come after it, because Grant and I have discussed this in the what they do in animal studies It would be basically be all the lies of the research that they never did. Like, scientists used to say that they wouldn't research vitamin A deficiency in humans because they said what would happen, and this is what I see in my clients, is the vitamin A levels will tend to stay pretty steady. They'll stay pretty level for a long time. How that's telling you, like, people are not eating it. So they take their intake way down and their levels stay very steady for a very long time. And I tell people the only way that that's happening is it's coming out of your liver. Like, that's how much vitamin A you have in your liver. You have years and years worth of this. And then all of a sudden this is what they said in the research, all of a sudden it'll drop very rapidly. And they said, we're really worried about people getting unfixable vitamin A deficiency symptoms if we do this. So we're just not going to study vitamin A deficiency in humans. Actually, the scientists said, we're not going to study this. Here we are. But then the other thing was in the mice and rat studies they do, the casein protein, the dairy protein that they get from it, they will say that it's vitamin A free when it actually turns, if you've seen casein, like Greek yogurt kind of casein kind of thing, that's basically casein. It's white, right? But when they process the casein, they make it into the casein powder that they use in the animal studies, it turns a yellowish color. And if you analyze like casein, there's studies showing that there is vitamin A in casein protein, and they treat these casein proteins with heat and with alcohol, and they say that they've removed the vitamin A from it. So then they do these studies on these animals, and they say, look what happens when we give them a vitamin A free diet when there's absolutely vitamin A in the protein they're giving them, and it's actually the more toxic form of it. It's retinoic acid and retinaldehyde because of what they did to it. But when they analyze the protein, they say there's zero retinol in it. So the whole thing is a gigantic deception of them being able to say vitamin A isn't present because we're looking for the wrong types and we're not going to look for the other types. Like, isn't it crazy that they say retinoic acid is the active form of vitamin A, but they never do any studies on blood retinoic acid levels or retinoic acid? They don't look for retinoic acid in the casein powder that they give the rats, and so they just avoid looking at it. It's just look over here. Don't look over here. We're not going to let you. And don't study this, because then things would look really ugly. Like when I show people that there are studies showing that if you eat vitamin A, you are peeing out the same type of retinoic acid, 13-cis retinoic acid, that is Accutane. So whenever you eat vitamin A, your body's turning it into the Accutane compound. And if you don't know about the side effects of Accutane, you should look them up, because it's a horrible, horrible drug, but your body turns vitamin A into it. So you're taking Accutane if you're eating vitamin A. So there's tons of, I would go back and just restart the whole vitamin A science debacle. So it didn't. So hopefully that would have changed the whole fat soluble narrative of, I mean, retinol is an alcohol, tocopherol is an alcohol, and cholecalciferol is an alcohol. If you don't know, that's vitamin A, vitamin E, and vitamin D. We're trying to say that chemically alcohols are necessities for us to live. When you start digging deeper into it, it gets even more sketchy. So it's just, they called them vitamins because they called them vital amines, like protein-based compounds. But yet we're now calling alcohols, fat-soluble alcohols, vitamins and essential. So it goes deeper than just vitamin A. But vitamin K I didn't mention because vitamin K is a totally different chemical class, and I haven't decided on that one yet. But that's where I'd go back and fix things, would be the initial discovery of vitamin A. And you want to know who funded the initial vitamin A and vitamin research? The Rockefellers and Merck.
Oh.
What they were looking at was they were supposedly seeing the writing on the wall of, back then they thought pharmaceuticals were going to lose market share. It was one of two things. They either thought that pharmaceuticals were going to lose market share, or they realized that they had to control the other side of, like, the health nut side. So, right, you're going to have the people who take the pharmaceuticals, and then you got to control the health nut side. So then you make vitamins. So the Rockefellers are controlling both sides of medicine. And then Merck just gave an award for vitamin science to some guy. And most of the B vitamins are derived from coal tar.
Wow.
People are just like, yeah, sure, we need these things. We need derivatives of coal tar. And it's really, what we're finding is as we get the toxicity out of people, they need less of everything, because a lot of it is just fighting toxicity in the system. Kind of like original sin, right? It's if you're toxic from the get-go, what are you gonna do? You know? Anyway, but yeah, that's I would restart vitamin science. Absolutely. From the very beginning.
So big.
Thank you. Okay, the next question is for Rome. What was your most interesting case where you thought it was impossible to cure, but it turned out your client healed that issue?
I've had a few really interesting cases. I've never thought that it was impossible. I'm perpetually optimistic about everything that could be. Like, I feel like humans have this infinite potential to heal, as long as the environment and the circumstances around their life are lined up to heal, right? Like, the body wants to heal. It's just that we're so addicted to the negative emotions and the feelings and the things that we put into us that we just can't stop. So, all right, I have one very specific one that I saw a couple years ago. He was a professional athlete, like an endurance athlete, also a coach. And I saw him, and I took a look, and I was like, bro, you're in trouble. Like, you're gonna need this. And he's like, oh, I think I'm okay. Like, well, but he's just tough. You know, endurance athletes are tough. Like, they're tough humans. They run 100-mile races. Like, they're just like, they're sick in the head. Like, they're trying to outrun whatever it is that they're trying to outrun. Whatever trauma that they experienced when they were younger, they're trying to outrun it. So they've learned how to be really tough. And I told him, I took some measurements and I looked at him, because one of the things that I do when I see people, I can give you your measurements, and I can pretty much predict your symptoms, I don't know, 80% accurately, just from seeing the measurements and seeing how you're breathing. There's a lineup of maybe 15, 20 symptoms that I look at, and I can predict them at this point pretty like efficiently. I've seen over 4,000 people. So at first I was like unsure, but then like heuristically, like, you know, you practice and you're like, oh shit. Like, I mean, I'm very rarely surprised. Let's just put it that way. And I'd love to be more surprised, but because my predictions are usually very catastrophic for people, because I can see the trajectory where they're headed. I'm sure Doc has something similar where he looks at a lab and he asks them what they're eating, and you're like, holy shit, like, you are you're headed off a cliff, you know? And like, my heart breaks for these people, because sometimes they're such incredible humans, and they have so much momentum going in that direction. So I saw this guy, and at that point I was only working with people one-on-one and in small groups. Like, I didn't create the program yet, because for me to create a program, I need to test it enough. I need pressure testing. I need to see that it works. I don't want to take a weekend course and go and create a program. The coach, that's the other deception in the coaching industry. A lot of these coaches aren't practicing what they're teaching. So that's a huge problem. You know, it's
Let me add to that. Let me add
Yeah.
to that. The other coaching thing is people learn one method, and then they think that applies to everybody in every case. And it's like the candida thing. Everybody's got candida, and that's causing everything. But they'll do the same thing in the coaching thing. I just had to throw that in there. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
For sure. I mean, in jiu-jitsu, they have a saying: if you're a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. You know? And in Russian, there's a saying, "Сапожник без сапог," which means like a shoemaker with no shoes.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of these people in the industry are. So I told him, I was like, look, if I don't work with you, like right now, just do these exercises. I was like, just please, just do these exercises. Because what I found, what I saw was he had a paradoxical breathing style, which means that he was breathing exactly the opposite of what the ideal is. Usually in my experience before that, and I was working with these ideas for maybe 3 or 4 years specifically, in that space, usually those people start to have suicidal ideations, and that kind of warrior is going to kill himself. They're not going to do it for empathy or anything from other people. They're just going to do it like a samurai would, like when they stick the sword in their belly, like a suicide, it's a very it's a warrior's way to go out for a lot of these people, whether they realize it or not. Like historically, that's kind of how it was. So if they're in so much pain, that's what they're going to do, because there's no other solution for it. Like you either go to the root cause or you kill yourself. That was a big one. I told him, you're going to call me back in 6 months if you don't do this. 6 months later, I get a call. I get a call back, and I didn't even have his number programmed. I was just like, look, like I'm still around, but it's going to be a lot harder 6 months from now. So he called me, and he was just like, bro, I don't know who to call. I don't know what to do. I got, everything's falling apart. He's like, my children, like my relationship with my children are falling apart. He's like, I'm having panic attacks. Like he's like, I want to smash my head through a wall. And this is like, I mean, from the outside, this guy he's a unit. It's like 220 pounds, 6'2", like ripped, chiseled. But in the Chinese medicine, they have a saying where it's just like strong on the outside, but rotting on the inside. And that's kind of like what this world looks like nowadays. A lot of like beautiful aesthetics, but on the inside, like shit. Yeah. That's the best way I could, like bile, shit, like disgusting, and it's like, so I started working with him, and little by little, every day he was practicing, because that's the kind of person that, like, once they understand why they're doing it, they're a machine. Like they're just like doop, 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 doop. If you can build the momentum, those people are incredible. You just have to stop the train from moving first, because that train is about to go off the cliff. And he's got 4 kids, 4 kids, a wife, a house, tons of students, and like it would be a big loss for his community for him to off himself. So we started working together, and yeah, I mean, little by little, 3-4 months later, I mean, he was back to his normal self, and he keeps up the work. But it was very challenging to work with somebody that wound up and tight and strong, because what happens is the body creates something called a muscular corset, because they're so muscular. They have abs, like they're just ripped. So in order for you to breathe properly, you have to learn how to relax. And their whole life, they thought that this look was a weakness. And I actually posted a video in the Nervous System Evolution last week, something about it, where I don't even believe the Buddha was fat. You know how the depiction of the Buddha is very fat, but I don't believe he was fat. This is something that came to me. I believe that because I've seen it myself, a lot of teachers that I practice with, they have these big bellies, but when they flex, they have abs. And that's chi. Like they say that that's like the accumulation of chi in the lower dantian with the Chinese martial arts. And what I think was that the Buddha was very skilled in some Chinese martial arts, especially with chi and breath. So maybe the depiction was an honoring of his chi belly. And now we look at it as he was a fat fuck, but he wasn't. Maybe, potentially, maybe he just had a big chi belly. Because from the West, we look at it, we're like, oh, he had no discipline. But if you read the stories of his disciplines and his ascetic practices, it's like it would be insane for him to develop such a big belly with those practices. So it's just something that I was thinking about, because I believe that a lot of our ancient avatars practiced breath work and movement and yoga and qigong and all of these practices, because I mean, think about the stories of Jesus. Like, he touched somebody and he can heal them. In order to do that, you have to develop that energy inside in order to do it. So yeah, I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but I think that it's all connected, because a lot of these, like, for example, this client that I had, he's a warrior, but only on the external. On the internal, he was broken, because like what Gabor was saying, that oh, it's the mind or it's the body, was just like, that's a Cartesian deception. Like, and he only wrote that because he wanted to save his ass from the church so he doesn't get persecuted at that time, you know? So it's crazy. Like, there is no body and no mind. I ask my clients all the time, especially the really rich, heady ones. And I'm like, oh, if you think they're separated, show me where one ends and the other one begins. And that stumps them usually, because they can't. It's impossible. Which is what modern science is proving also, right? Where they're saying that the gut is the second brain or the first brain or whatever the hell they're saying nowadays. But yeah.
Cool.
Thank you. The next question is for you. Is suffering a necessity for awakening?
No.
Okay.
Well, the common belief is that there is an ongoing dark night of the soul that's going on, and that we have to go through obstacles which are very difficult. And for real awakening, you go to a level within the body that there's no suffering. And so if you choose that path, then doesn't need to be suffering. If you go on a path of which is in time, if you go on a path that's clearing, doing more and more therapy to clear stuff, and eventually, sometimes in the future, we're going to get to this magical place called enlightenment. Yes, then there is the suffering. But if you go deep enough within, then in that path there is no suffering.
Yeah, I like you have a wonderful line in your book that says, why would God make the way back home so difficult?
So difficult, yeah.
He would have left
Like
breadcrumbs.
saying, come back home to me, but I put all these obstacles, and you have to use all these therapists just to make some progress.
For sure. Beautifully said.
Okay, one more for Garrett. If someone comes to you with high vitamin A and copper toxicity, what can this person expect during clearing out these toxins? What are the milestones on the road to recovery?
He was talking about that all the way through.
Like, just go over the whole program right now. Just cover the whole thing.
Everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be great if for any of us, for all of us who work with real people, to have it all be like spelled out and be like, first you hit this step, and then you hit this step, and then you hit this step, and then you hit this step, and it's nothing. Real life is nothing like that.
Nothing like that.
Like, this is why I kind of, people come to me and they say, what protocol do you do? And I say, I don't. Protocols are for lower level thinkers who don't understand the real world. There is no protocol.
That's right.
I mean, you can make a protocol, but just like they said, like, if you made a protocol that was perfect for one person, supposedly, but it would never be the best for anybody else. So, I mean, when we get into what are some milestones, so here's the thing that's so crazy about the work that I do, right? Modern medicine measures blood mainly. They've decided that the blood is everything. And one of the analogies I do is that the blood is like the roads out there, right? And you can measure how many, you could put those little things down on the road and count how many cars go by both ways. The problem is when we're measuring the blood, we're measuring cars both ways. And what I mean by that is you're doing one number for both directions of cars, because when things are coming in the body, they come in through the blood. And when they're leaving the body, they leave through the blood. So if you're measuring the blood, all you're getting is a number of what's moving, right? But if somebody then said, well, okay, so from the number of cars on the road, tell me how many cars are parked off the road. And then you'd say, well, you'd have to know how many total cars there are. And nobody gets to know that, because you'd have to measure the content of everything, you'd have to know all the cars. In a body, you'd have to know everything that's in every tissue. I remember when my environmental medicine, kind of the toxicology professor in naturopathic medicine, said, he's like, you can't really know the whole body burden, he called it, of toxins, because to do that, you'd have to biopsy every single different tissue. So you don't get to know that. So we can measure the blood, but the blood doesn't give us that. It doesn't give us the information we really want, which is what's in the tissues. So do I use blood tests? I use a couple of them. I use very few blood tests compared to all the, I use 4 blood tests. And it's just, we use it, but it helps drive some of my treatment recommendations. Absolutely. Especially the copper and zinc. But I often tell people, especially with their vitamin A number, I say your vitamin A number, just like we talked about earlier, may stay steady for several years. I think mine was probably around a 50, which was high. It's normal, but it's still high definitely high for where I want it. Mine probably stayed. I didn't do all the vitamin A tests I should have done in the beginning for myself, right? It's like the shoemaker with no shoes or the mechanic with a broken car, right? But when I started doing it, 3.5 years in, I was still above a 50. So I probably stayed very steady for a long time. And then it dropped to a 28. The reason I bring that up is because within the first year or two, where my vitamin A would have still been very high, I got rid of my chronic insomnia. I got rid of my psoriasis. I got rid of my urinary issues. I got rid of all sorts of health issues. But technically, my blood was still much higher than I would have wanted. So one of the things I do, we have to temper the blood tests and even the hair tests with, I always tell people, if you are doing what I generally suggest and your symptoms are improving, you are getting less toxic in the tissues. Over time, we'll definitely see the blood come down, but that's not our goal at the start. Like there are things that are very bad for people to do that can make their blood look better, their blood tests look better, but that means that all the toxicity is actually getting stuck in the liver and it's not coming out. So yeah, we have, when I measure the blood copper, when I measure the blood vitamin A, or when I do the hair for zinc and copper and all these things, like there is no straight line. People want it to be a straight line. Like they want to see their vitamin A just come down. They want to see their copper just come down. And it's like, as anybody knows, through even therapy and other approaches like that, where you're trying to fix things, you may be going along and nothing really happens until finally, boom, something big happens. And then you go, whoa, something just shifted. Something finally shifted. And then you can make, that might really suck for a while. You may feel really bad, or you may have a really tough time with it. But then once you get past that, then you feel better. So there's these similarities in all these approaches. And we can do the labs. I liken the labs to, it gives us a map. And it tells us on your map, you're here, and we want you here. Or even let's say, so if we're talking about nutrients, like you may be low, and we want you to be higher. Or if we're talking about toxicity, you may be high, and we want you to be lower. But anybody who's ever used, let's say, Google Maps in a city, and you look at those 2 points, there might be 20 different ways that you could drive to get there. And that's the difference in people. Like I have people who can refill their zinc stores without ever having to use a supplement. They try taking zinc and they don't feel good. like I have my best practices. That's what instead of protocols, I have like my best practices. And all of us who are practitioners, we tend to have our best practices where we're like, here's where we normally start. And then you watch their response. And if it's too hard for them, you take it down a notch. And if you're like, wow, you can really handle this, you follow all the instructions, you listen to your body, you're not having a super strong reaction to this, so let's give you more, right? And so that's where we look at the labs, we look at the map, and then based on the person's reactions, we can then change the route to get there. Like I know I need tons of zinc. I absolutely need tons of zinc. And I have some people who don't need any zinc. Or I had one woman refilled her zinc stores with 5 milligrams of zinc a day, which is so little. I was amazed. In 6 months, she refilled it. And I was like, I have never seen this before on this amount of zinc. And I just went, okay, that's you. That's great. I'm not going to then, I mean, it's not like the Twitter gurus who I see who are like, everybody needs 50 milligrams of zinc picolinate a day. And I'm going, that would absolutely destroy my copper toxic people. Like they wouldn't sleep a wink for a week. You can't just do that. So we have best practice. I have best practices. I don't want to speak for you guys, but I have best practices that I start people on, and we watch their response, and I listen to how their body reacts to it, and then we adjust. So are there milestones to it? Yeah, here's your milestones. Symptom 1 goes away. Symptom 2 goes away. Symptom 3 goes away. We are looking for overall blood improvements and hair test improvements, but as long as the symptoms are going away, we are moving in the right direction. Because I mean, as one practitioner who taught a seminar that I went to said to me, he said, make sure you ask the client in front of you why they're there. Like, what is bothering them? What symptoms do they have that are bothering them? Because he said, what you don't want to do is get into fixing their labs, and you fix their labs and their labs look better, but all their symptoms are still there. They didn't come to you to make their labs perfect. They came to you to get rid of their symptoms. And I don't treat symptoms. I'm trying to treat the root causes, but still the symptoms are how they manifest, right? So he said, do things to help their symptoms and you'll keep them as clients and make them happy. Don't just fix the labs. And so that's where people want lab accomplishments and all this stuff. I see people get better before they ever have a low vitamin A.
Right.
This is
and then over time, as their vitamin A gets into the lower phase, that's where we really see things that the client never expected or that they never complained about. They never really thought was a symptom. They're just like, I've just had this my entire life. And then all of a sudden, boom, that's gone. And then we go, oh, that's cool. Like, I don't often treat conditions. I mean, I try to help people with the symptoms at the start. I say, based on your symptoms, this is the most important thing A for you to do. And this is most important B thing for you to do. Because you can't concentrate on everything at once. We're all human, right? We can't do everything well at once. And those who go into the Love Your Liver program are overwhelmed with the amount of information in there because we have been poisoned from so many different angles. I can't just be like, don't eat vitamin A. I mean, that would be really simplistic and that would be really easy. I wish it were that simple, but as we've gone on, things are not that simple. And there's so many different ways that we've been poisoned. Like, am I going to tell people like, oh, sure, don't eat vitamin A, but go drink out of aluminum cans, right? And just poison your brain with aluminum. Like that's just, why would I leave that out? Right. There's many things that I still need to address, but the list just gets so big. So like when people come to me and they have, let's say, a skin issue or an eye issue, I'll say, getting your zinc right. And notice how I said getting your zinc right is really important in general for skin issues and eye issues. So like that's going to be something you want to focus on. People have joint pain or joint stiffness, like do your topical magnesium on that area. That will help to decalcify it and help it feel better. So if people have these issues, I make sure they focus on the parts that are the most important to their symptoms first. And then as they go along and they have more time and more mental space to learn more, then they do other things and they can put more focus into other things. So I'm constantly trying to think about how I can make the program easier and easier to follow along. And I've come some way in that with the order of adding stuff, but anyway, it's just I wish there were these easy milestones and other things where people can just say, what can you expect? I mean, if you want to know what to expect, there is a video on my YouTube channel where Grant Genereux and I talked about the timeline of vitamin A detox. And I think back then we were talking about 2 years to 3 years. Grant and I talked, and Grant's like, I think it's even longer. And I'm like, it seems to be longer, like to get it really down. But like I said, we can get rid of symptoms. Some people's, I just did a testimonial on the live stream last week where a woman said she's been doing this for 5 weeks and her scars are flattening out. They're not big raised bumpy scars. And I was sitting there going, 5 weeks. Wow, that's amazing. It's like they have on the commercials, right? Results are not typical. So I don't sell people on these things like things are going to be gone in weeks, because that would be dishonest, because that's not typical.
Yeah.
But can these things happen very quickly for certain people if that's the main driving thing for them, right? So like if Rome comes across somebody where the breathing is the problem and you fix the breathing, and then all of a sudden they're, oh my gosh, everything's amazing, and this fixed things we didn't even know were connected. And you go, well, yeah, that was the thing for you. So like the scars person, whatever she took out of her diet or whatever she added in was fixing that specific problem. I can't tell you what it was. Could be vitamin A, could be copper, could be maybe she's supplementing with magnesium or whatever. But when you nail it, you can see things get better very quickly. And if it's not that, like as I started to realize as I worked with Rome, and I was like, yeah, my breathing could use a lot of work. And I've been working on it, and things are getting better. And I can't wait to see Rome again to have him measure me. I'm pretty excited about that. So we just want to see symptoms get better and stay gone. That's the biggest thing that I tell people about in the like, especially in the supplement world. Like if you take an herb and it makes your symptom go away, what I always ask people, what do you think is going to happen when you stop taking that herb? The symptom never left. It's either going to come back or you've jammed it down into your system to go somewhere else, because nobody has an herb deficiency. You didn't fix any root cause with an herb. It just, most pharmaceuticals are based on herbs. So that means they're like cousins. They're related. So if you start using herbs to shut down things or to drive things deeper, it's going to you can always convert one disease into another. And so we want to get to the root cause, and that takes a long time, but there's no specific pathway for each person. I mean, when I started this, I didn't know what was going to happen for me. You know, the insomnia went away first. I remember the very first day I woke up. I woke up in the morning and I was in the same position that I went to sleep in. I didn't even move during the night. And that was like the shock of that, because I was a really bad insomniac. I was like, oh my gosh, did I just sleep through the night? And it was amazing. It was one of those things. And then when my psoriasis disappeared from my knuckle finally, and then when I didn't have to pee, I mean, there was a time during medical school, you know, I'm learning naturopathic medicine. I'm trying to do all the stuff I'm learning, right? And I had to pee. I had to go to the bathroom 5 times before I could go to sleep. I mean, I was 25 and my dad was sick with prostate cancer. So I was real concerned. And I even went to the clinic at the school and they just kind of poo-pooed it. I was like, I have to pee like 5 times to go to sleep. And they were just kind of like, we're going to work on your back pain. And I was like, okay. But then those things went away. And, you know, I can't say that there was I was thinking each one would go away. The insomnia is usually the first one to go for people. That's a quick one, but you can stir it up with detox and then have problems with it. So that's why there's not a specific thing. It's just like anybody training anything. You can always go too hard and do too much and cause problems. So it's a balance, and it all depends on, you can always do too little too. So I wish it were easy. It's just not. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so next question, I believe is for Rome.
What exercise do you suggest which can help the detoxing, the healing?
The first one I would start with is breath work, and getting it right. Like getting it right. Getting your breathing to the point where it's constantly in a parasympathetic state, so that you're constantly in a place of like rest, relax, digest, repair. Because if you the 7 minutes of breath work is just a repatterning exercise, or 21 minutes, whatever. I have one client, she escaped from a cult, and she had a lot of trauma. So it's like she was born into it. She didn't even like join on her own. Like she was born into it. So she escaped. So she had a lot of like stuff going on. And I mean, I gave her the exercises, and she was doing it like 8 to 10 times a day, every day. So 8 to 10 times, that's like 70 minutes of breath. But she needed it. I mean, her breath was horrendous, because of all the trauma, right? Because this is how really like it works. It's like we breathe perfectly up until the age of around 5.5. That's at least what the studies show. So what happens at around 5.5? We go to school, we stop crawling on the floor, we start wearing tighter clothes, we start being judged for our grades. So maybe our parents get divorced, so on and so forth, right? Maybe we get hit with a ball, or we get into a fight. Something happens where we restrict our breathing for one day. Now it's a new cycle. Why? Almost 20,000 breaths or so, right? So tuk, tuk, next cycle, and it just creates this giant cycle where it's just like one of those giant earth mover tires. I don't know if you guys ever saw those like giant earth movers. They're like these giant tractors that are like enormous. But imagine one of those tires escapes and it just goes down the hill. It'll destroy everything in its path, for sure. A small village will be in shambles from that giant tire. And I think that's what happens with most people, is like it's very hard to stop that cycle. So breathing is the easiest thing that they can do, because one, they're already doing it. Two, it's really hard to come up with the excuse that I don't have time to breathe, because it just sounds stupid when you say it out loud. And then three, like you can do it. Like I worked with a girl a few years ago that had an autoimmune disorder, and I think it was, I don't want to say it was lupus, but she lost the use of her legs. Beautiful girl, yogi, so practicing teacher of yoga. One day woke up, had a really stressful day before, woke up, couldn't use her legs, still can't use her legs to this day. But so much stress of like to go from like fully capable human to now they're handicapped. And she's like, she wasn't even 30 years old yet. And so somebody called me and they're like, hey, can you see her? And I was like, yeah, no problem. So I stopped by her house. We did some work, and she can do breath work. She can still do exercises. So it's like, whether you're in a wheelchair, whether you're laying down in bed, like you can start with this. Like, and I think that's the magic of it for detox, especially because if you're super toxic, you can be doing all the things with the nutrition, laying in bed. If you're like for example, like when people, I know a woman that had Lyme disease and she couldn't get out of bed for 3 years. But like she can breathe. You know, like she can't do poses, she can't do a lot of movement, but she can breathe. You can start there. You're in a wheelchair, you're laying down, you're standing, you're walking, you're out in nature. Hopefully you're not in New York City, and you can breathe. And I think that's where it starts in the best way for detox, for regulating the nervous system, and for just honestly being more conscious and aware. Because if you're because the breath is actually a very interesting thing, because it's one of the only things, if not the only thing, that is unconscious and conscious. It's a really fine line between, because like most people do it unconsciously, right? But if you bring it into your conscious awareness, then you can do it consciously. And then the more you do it consciously, the better it gets when you do it unconsciously, because you go through the four stages of competence. You go through unconscious incompetence, and then maybe I run into somebody and I'm like, hey, you breathe like shit. Do you have these symptoms? And they're like, yes. How did you know? And I was like, I I literally need 5 seconds. I just need a look. So, and I have to ask people permission. I'm like, do I have your permission to take a look at how you breathe? Because otherwise I'm just sitting around all day looking at people and I'm like, oh man, this person's probably got premature ejaculation or they can't sleep or whatever is going on, you know? And it's like, it's a gift and a curse. But then, you know, it goes from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. Now they're conscious. And this is the hardest one. This is the hardest one, I believe, because when you don't know, you don't know. Well, maybe you just fall off a cliff and you don't realize it. But when you know that you're doing something messed up, now it's like, if you're a human that's very self-conscious, you might quit and go back into your shame cycles and guilt cycles or whatever. But like, if you're a human that really wants to evolve, you're going to take it to the next level. And this is the hardest level, to know that you're doing something messed up, to know that you shouldn't, not should, right? Because should is an aggressive word, but maybe that you could potentially not yell at your children, or you could potentially be more honest and full of integrity with your wife or your partner or whatever, right? Like, all of those things are very painful to look at, because you look at who you were and now who you are. And then you can go through the next cycle, which is conscious competence. And then you go to unconscious competence, where you're sleeping and you're practicing, you're having sex and you're practicing breathing, you're exercising and you're practicing breathing, you're doing jiu-jitsu, you're shooting and you're practicing breathing. Like, you're doing all these things and you're practicing, you're working with a client and you're practicing breathing, because it's important to practice breathing when you're working with the client, because we have this resonance when we work with humans, especially if we're like very empathic, where we can pick up their breathing cycles, God forbid, you know, in that moment, because then we can feel what they feel. So it's important to stay inside of your element, so it protects us from taking on their shit. I have enough of my own shit. I don't want to carry around other people's shit. I just got my shit to smell good. Better. So yeah, breath work, 100% breath work.
I love
100.
that perspective. Oh, that's great. Okay, Gabor, one more question for you.
How can one reach and maintain timelessness?
That question does not belong to this panel or answer, so I'm not going to answer that. It would be another 5-hour lecture. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
It's from beginning to end.
If you do teach it, I would like to join and listen. So make sure.
Yeah, hey,
Make sure to let me know.
it's a separate conversation. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. But
This question will be answered in the next video panel in September. Stay tuned. Subscribe to this channel to be informed.
Okay. So is there anything else that any one of you would like to add?
I would like to add one thing for the viewers. When you're watching Instagram and you're seeing something aesthetically pleasing, watch for this one thing when you're looking at breathing, when you're looking at movement, when you're looking at people. Watch when people are breathing, that if they're breathing like this or like this. Because a lot of people in the breathwork community nowadays, and this is something that I didn't mention when I was talking, a lot of people in the breathwork community, they're seeing results and they feel good short term when they're doing a lot of this stuff. You'll see a lot of that on Instagram, and I'm not naming any names, but I've trained with a lot of these gurus. And the thing is that short term, you can see a lot of benefits, because, I mean, there's a lot of cortisol dumping, adrenaline dumping. There's a lot of stuff going on in the body. It feels good. It feels good. But long term, they're stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. And long term, those people, just like vitamin A might feel good short term, or eating liver might feel good short term, but the long term price that you pay, very, 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 very big price. So with your eyes, just watch and see where people are. I have the self-analysis in the nervous system evolution. 15 seconds, you look in the mirror where you are. Are you breathing like this? Because then you're probably more in a sympathetic state. If you're breathing like this, and the shoulders, the neck isn't moving, right here, the clavicular area is not moving, now you know you're in more parasympathetic state. You can also time your breaths and all that other stuff. I go deeper into that. But watch those people, because who you learn from is very important. If they can't do what you want to do, be very careful. Be very careful. You know, one of my teachers used to say that you need to go through 3 steps. You need to know, like, if you're looking for, there's so many people. We have 8 billion people. There's somebody that's going to have something that you want to do, but hopefully they know how to do it. Hopefully they know how to do it. And hopefully they've taught it to somebody else, because maybe they're a freak of nature. You know, there's people out there, like Doc might get them sometimes and boom, instantly. You know, one of my teachers used to tell me there's people you can put them into a closet, open it up a year later, and they're better at jiu-jitsu, or they're better at whatever. You know, some people were just built differently. I'm not like that. I have to work my ass off to get to certain places. You know, like I didn't get the benefit of 6-foot genetics with 220 pounds of muscles, you know? So, but you know, it's like, and can they teach it to a lot of people? Also, you know, like do they have a track record of teaching it to a lot of people? And you can start to see how people carry themselves, how like when Gabor speaks, I want to listen, right? Like there's a resonance there. I want to listen to that because there's something there that's inside of me that's like, oh, that sounds like home. You know, when Doc speaks, like there's a resonance there. Like look for that resonance, listen to your intuition. And like, be like, okay, like if this person looks like shit, then why am I going to learn from them? Just because they have 500,000 followers? You know, like, I don't know who's, yeah, I mean, it's like, it's disturbing what people use as a benchmark for who they choose to learn from. And the people that have a lot of followers, I would be very skeptical of for the most part, because how did they get them and who gave them to them?
That's right. And why weren't they kicked off YouTube?
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
And why are they showing the movie in all these theaters?
Right.
Exactly. Because I mean, if people were really healing doing this thing, then you know, a lot of those people were bastardized, ridiculed, shamed, kicked out, killed, right? I mean, the naturopathic community, I mean, you don't have to go too far in the naturopathic community. I bet everybody knows somebody that suffered suicide through 2 shotgun wounds to the chest. You know?
Who did the second one?
For sure. And where's the gun? But yeah, I mean, just trust your intuition, develop your intuition. And that's what I believe that a lot of the breath work does, is because the intuition lives here. Like muscle testing could be very powerful too, but also like when you get to a certain point of your own development, you can trust yourself. You can trust yourself. Like you trust yourself, and you can weed out the charlatans, because there's a lot of that out there, and it can lead you really far off that cliff.
Fantastic. Well, this has been very enlightening conversation. I'm enjoying it thoroughly. I wish it could go on forever, but most people have very short attention spans.
Well, maybe we can do this in person sometime.
What's that?
Maybe we can do this in person sometime.
That would be lovely.
Yeah.
That would be lovely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I wish you could both come to Hungary. It's so beautiful here.
Well, maybe. I mean, me and Doc haven't done a trip together yet, so that might be one.
That would be awesome.
I'd love to go to the US. You know.
Yeah.
Perhaps at the next year there is an election.
Well, who knows?
Well, I mean, if you guys ever do come to the US, you guys always have a place to stay. When I have a home, I always have multiple bedrooms.
Oh,
So you guys are more than welcome to stay.
thank you so much.
Thank you so
You're
much.
kind.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well,
Okay.
thank you for all this wonderful information and sharing your life and stories and techniques and everything with us. And those who asked the questions, thank you for sending them. And the audience, thank you for watching. If you like this, then let us know by clicking like on it. Otherwise, how would we know? If you really, really liked it, go down to the description and find information about Rome, about Dr. Smith, and about Gabor Harsanyi, and check it out for yourself. And like Rome said, if you have a good feeling about it, if you resonate, if you feel within your heart that any one of these areas, whether it's spiritual or health or exercise or whatever, if you feel within your heart that it's for you and it can help you, don't just sit on your ass, do something about it. I did, and it's
sure.
working great for me. So I wish you all the best. Thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you guys.
God bless.
Yes.
God bless.
Thank you.
Thanks for
God
having
bless.
us.
And we'll probably do it again very soon.
Okay.
Feel free to write feedback and or questions in the comment section below.
For sure. Yeah, that was fun. I enjoyed it thoroughly.